Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're going to do 6 more episodes here. We're going to do 6 episodes in December, and then I'm going to dip out for a couple of weeks, and then I'll be back on January 5th. That's the plan. Kind of works out that way pretty much every single year. Certainly has, I think, over the last 5 years. And there you go. With that said, Dr. Robin McCutcheon will be back this Wednesday. We have not talked yet, but we will. Looking forward to that. And as soon as that conversation is recorded and set to go, I will upload it. And you can give that a listen if interested. Much to discuss, of course, with her. The end of Marshall University's semester, of course. Maybe some campus jab updates and a number of other things as well. But we'll get into all of that for Wednesday. But for this episode, here's what I'd like to discuss. First of all, I've got a particular post here having to do with just numbers in general, population numbers specifically. There's also a Supreme Court case that is apparently coming up here having to do with birthright citizenship and whether or not that is legal. We're going to get into that here in this episode also. And then a couple of education stories as well, and some good news on that front. Also a particular story out of Missouri that has to do with a great deal of corruption. And again, it's rather stereotypical, I think, of how a great deal of these school districts operate, certainly when it comes to money and paying people out and trying to keep people from talking and a number of other things. The Thomas More Society also put together an article having to do with the Colorado Medical School and how they have been sued and were sued and successfully sued as a result of discriminating against individuals regarding the COVID shots and all of that. And then again, just a few observations having to do with some TV watching that I was doing during the, college football conference championship games on Saturday, which again were interesting to say the least, but the commercials are flat out demoralizing. They really are. And it's so sad and bizarre, but I'll get into that toward the end. Okay, here we go. There was a particular post on greatawakening.win the other day, and I screenshot these from time to time when I find them a bit fascinating, and this one I think is. And it ties in again to the Supreme Court case and what might come from this, because that's already being debated. And here we go. Here's what it says. It was titled, "I'm convinced at this point that we don't know what the real population and demographic statistics are. Everything is fake, and we probably won't have the real numbers until the cabal is destroyed." They said the following, quote, "This post isn't about explaining the semantics and manipulation typically used to intentionally manipulate statistics and demographic numbers to push narratives. It's more just me putting an idea out here into the ether I had from an in-real-life conversation earlier with a family member. They said basically the conversation started with all of the very obvious blacks being labeled as white in the criminal system and kind of snowballed from there. It was pointed out to me that during the conversation that juror pools are a very obvious sign that something is wrong with official demographic and population statistics. For example, someone that we knew that recently had jury duty did some digging for our county, and roughly 20,000 K-ish people supposedly only had 400 people in the entire county that qualified for jury duty. So only 400 out of 20,000 some odd people apparently qualify for jury duty in this person's county. They went on, they said not on current call, but in the entire county of 20,000 people, only 400 people qualified to be called for jury duty. Even if you account for felons, retirees, children, emergency services, and all the other typical exemptions, that's absurd that only 2% of the entire county actively qualify for jury duty. This led to a rabbit hole conversation where basically we started talking about all the fraud, Social Security numbers being used in multiple states to collect benefits multiple times, sometimes multiple times in the same state, but different counties, etc. And the conclusion we came to was that pretty much every demographic and population statistic is a lie with our currently corrupt system. There's no way to know for certain what the real makeup of the country is anymore. Personally, we both came to the conclusion that it's not as multicultural, quote unquote, as they'd have us believe, i.e., the country is whiter and more Christian than official narratives. Because why else would they push the narrative so hard and do everything that they can to make people accept it and forcibly change demographics? They went on and said, and because I know someone will say, quote, that's not true, I live in X area and it's nothing but Mexicans, blacks, Muslims, insert random invader race, unquote. I'm not saying certain areas haven't had demographic change. That's obviously true. But on the whole, the country probably hasn't changed that much demographically from, say, the 70s or 80s, for example. Certain areas have experienced demographic changes as whites, Christians, etc. move out to other areas, and refugees and invaders come in for the cheap housing, thus creating ghettos. But if you look at the whole picture, the demographics probably aren't that different from the 70s or 80s, which is why they have to push the narrative so hard. This applies to total population too. Supposedly, the US has 340-something million people. But if this theory proves correct, that number could be far lower, which would explain a multitude of things. Why re-immigration and deportation is so important. Get rid of the invaders and refugees, and all of a sudden it frees up space for actual Americans. But it also cleans the books, quote unquote, so to speak, in regards to the actual population without creating a panic. Because you can just roll in a bunch of fake deportations with the real ones to fluff the numbers because some of these people never actually existed. Likewise, this could be why Trump and others in the know don't seem that worried about demographic collapse and birth rates, etc. Because if the true US population is something like, say, 250 million, after you get rid of the illegals, refugees, and fake people, quote unquote, then that drastically shifts the math about birth rates, and we could very well be far above replacement value at that point. I'm not saying this is concrete or absolutely true, but just an intriguing in real life conversation I had that I thought I'd bring on here for people to discuss about. It's obviously rather not a perfect theory, but a lot of it does make sense. I mean, beyond the illegals, we know the cabal does use fake people who just straight up don't exist for money laundering. Why not do so to manipulate voting power, votes, surveys, official data, quote unquote, etc., to set the narrative in order to have mass formation be in their favor, unquote. Again, it's a legit question, because population numbers really are one of those things that have been manipulated for such a long time. It really is a head scratcher. Again, I've played videos before. I don't think I did it on the show here, but it was certainly in one of the war videos, and it had to do with a Asian lady, and she was openly talking about the population of China. And she says the entire world is consistently being manipulated about what the true population of China is. For example, when it comes to the world population, you basically always hear the number 7 billion. That there's 7 billion people on the world, and there are 1 billion people who live in China. But China, as we know, has population control. And basically, just given that fact alone, one of the things that this woman was openly mentioning is she basically said China probably has 450 million people, give or take. That again, this business of 1 billion living in China is completely false. Now, if you put China to the side and you just focus on the United States, and again, you look at all of the illegal alien fraud that is being exposed now, which I think, again, I'm not the only one who thinks this, is that this is an open D-class that is happening for the entire public to see. That's why all eyes right now are on Minnesota. And everybody's focusing on that, of course, and the Somali population and a number of things. But it's also being done to, of course, stir up interest in getting rid of these individuals, regardless of where people live. Again, major cities and towns around cities are filling up with Somalis. Well, how many of them are actually on the books? Again, I've always contested that this is one of the reasons why you don't see many Somali men around. I'm not saying that they don't exist. I'm simply saying that they are the ones who are predominantly the illegals. It's not, again, that the females aren't illegals, and it's not even that they're creating anchor babies. We know that they are. But even so, like the original poster said there, when you take into account all of the fraud of all of the population manipulation, and you look, for example, at the voter totals, the number of individuals, again, who are registered voters in a particular area, and then the number of people that actually vote, or the percentages of people that actually vote. I mean, it doesn't even add up properly. Again, in the area where I live, in an off election, you will typically have somewhere around 23 to 25% of the so-called registered voters actually voting. I can't believe that in this day and age that number is that low. Simply based on the fact that we have so much information at our fingertips, and individual responsibility and voting responsibility is massive. And again, the amount of information that's out there for anybody to interpret and analyze is endless. So the more a person looks at this information, why would a person not want to vote? Even with voting, of course, being corrupt the way that it is, and even voter rolls being corrupt. If people are using voter rolls for population determination, then, well, we know that can't be accurate. Because I think every single state, by and large, typically has more people on the voter rolls than what are actual voters, and certainly what actual voters really exist. For me personally, it's right up there with the debt clock. I've spoken about it before, and you're probably well aware too, but you see the debt clock all of the time. And of course, it exists in Times Square in New York City, and it's consistently rolling, and it's consistently increasing in the whole thing. I think that entire thing is a psychological operation also. I don't believe for a minute that there's a real debt clock that's increasing the way that it is perceived to be increasing. I think it is, again, designed for individuals to see it and then basically scare themselves into realizing that whatever financial trouble they have, they're never going to be able to get out of it because the country isn't going to be able to get out of it. Because you'll never be able to slow down that number, let alone catch up, let alone pay it back. So again, using numbers to manipulate a population is certainly one of the ways that you can demoralize it. Now, with that said, there's other ways of demoralizing it as well, which of course directly relates to the 14th Amendment. And this business of it being interpreted and misinterpreted, rather, after all of these years, into basically giving rights to children whose parents just happen to give birth in this country, even though their parents are not legal citizens. This is a massive problem too, and as one would expect, it would alter the population and population numbers of any country, let alone ours. So I want to give a little rundown here of the 14th Amendment before I get into what the Supreme Court is going to take up, which I find it interesting that they're taking this up now. It says the following here: 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution is one of the three Reconstruction Amendments, along with the 13th and the 15th, ratified on July 9th of 1868, shortly after the Civil War. It's one of the most important and most frequently litigated amendments in the Constitution. The amendment consists of 5 sections, but Section 1 is by far the most significant and well-known. Section 1 says the following: all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Again, these other sections can't be dismissed either, and I'm going to read them because they're important, and I think it speaks again to a lot of the fraud that's existed here. Section 2, it says, representatives shall be appointed among the several states according to their respective numbers, counting the whole number of a person in each state, excluding Indians not taxed. But when the right to vote at any election is denied to any of the male inhabitants of such state, being 21 years of age, and citizens of the United States, or in any way abridged, the basis of representation therein shall be reduced. Section 3 says this: no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress who, having previously taken an oath to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same. So that's an interesting one. Again, you can see where this amendment is being manipulated and has been manipulated over time. You have individuals running for office openly saying that they hate our country. And yet it's kind of clear here that that's not what the founding fathers had in mind. It says, Section 4 here, the validity of the public debt of the United States shall not be questioned, but neither the United States nor any state shall assume or pay any debt or obligation incurred in aid of insurrection or rebellion against the United States. So if I'm interpreting that correctly, doesn't that mean that we don't have to pay any debt to any country who has been at war with us or seeking to again manipulate our country? I could have that wrong, but that's kind of what it seems like, which again, doesn't that lean on the debt question then, and that entire debt clock being fake? It says, Section 5, the Congress shall have power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. And then, of course, there's the citizenship clause where it says, quote, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside, established birthright citizenship, and overturned the Dred Scott 1857 case decision that denied citizenship to African Americans. Again, there's privilege and immunities clause, due process clause, equal protection clause, etc., etc. The debate here comes with, again, what was the original interpretation of the 14th Amendment? And it's pretty crystal clear that it didn't have anything to do with foreigners coming into our country, reproducing like rabbits, and then their rabbit children basically become citizens by default. That's not why it was developed. That wasn't the point. And again, this is where if you don't have an originalist to the Constitution, looking at it from a historic perspective, then you can't manipulate the amendment to allow something illegal to take place. What you can do is you can have a country vote on such a thing. You can have individuals in our country vote to see whether or not they want anchor babies or they don't. I think the vast majority of Americans would say no to that in a vote. I think the founding fathers would say no to that, period. I'm not even sure they were thinking about it. But again, this is the problem with when you have individuals who are judges, who are ideologues, and they don't care about the originality nor the context nor the history of the Constitution and the amendments to it, of course. They're not interested in that. They're interested in the current state of affairs and interpreting a document based on current state of affairs. And you can't do that. At least I don't think so. A person has to be an originalist when looking at that document. Was that document for anchor babies? No. Well, problem solved then. Case closed. If you're an anchor baby, you're not a citizen here. It's that simple. So start filing your papers, become a natural citizen, or certainly, again, something like become a natural citizen now. No more anchor babies from here on out. And again, if a child is born here in our country from here on out, again, hopefully with a positive decision in this particular case, well, then you have to go home with your parents. You have to go back to where you all came from. So here's what this says from the Gateway Pundit. It says, quote, in a stunning development, Supreme Court agrees to decide constitutionality of Trump's birthright citizenship executive order. It says the following here, quote, in September, President Trump asked the Supreme Court to end birthright citizenship. Democrat attorneys general sued the Trump administration to block the birthright citizenship executive order. Several federal judges, have blocked President Trump's birthright citizenship executive order. Judge John, no way I get that last name, Kaufner, if I'm saying that right, a Reagan-appointed judge in Seattle, previously issued a nationwide temporary injunction against Trump's birthright citizenship executive order. In February, U.S. District Judge for the District of Massachusetts, a Leo Sorkin, and Obama appointee, blocked Trump's order and said in a 31-page ruling that loss of birthright citizenship, even if temporary and later restored, can likely leave permanent scars. Again, it's all feelings. It shouldn't take 31 pages to voice your opinion about it. You just look at the 14th Amendment and do what it says. But this guy's nuts. According to President Trump's order, the 14th Amendment is being misinterpreted by the left to give citizenship to anchor babies, quote unquote. It says, quote here, "It is the policy of the United States that no department or agency of the United States government shall issue documents recognizing United States citizenship or accept documents issued by state, local, or other governments or authorities purporting to recognize United States citizenship to persons, one, when that person's mother was unlawfully present in the United States and the person's father was not a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident at the time of said person's birth, or two, when that person's mother's presence in the United States was lawful but temporary, and the person's father was not a United States citizen or lawful permanent resident at the time of said person's birth," Trump's order stated. Seems common sense. It says the 14th Amendment has never been interpreted to extend citizenship universally to everyone born within the United States. The 14th Amendment has always excluded from birthright citizenship persons who were born in the United States, but not, quote, "subject to the jurisdiction thereof," Trump's order said. Consistent with this understanding, the Congress has further specified through legislation that, quote, "a person born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof is a national and citizen of the United States at birth," 8 U.S.C. 1401, generally mirroring the 14th Amendment's text, the order stated. So the Supreme Court said Friday that it'll decide the legality of President Trump's executive order that seeks to end birthright citizenship, which automatically grants citizenship to anyone born in the United States. Unquote. Again, if you think about a very basic amendment to the Constitution in all of these years, decades, frankly, if not well over 100 years now, has been misinterpreted to actually mean, again, that foreigners can come here, reproduce, and because they reproduce on American soil, that they, of course, their children are by default American citizens. That, again, being a feeling and not a fact is astounding, because that simply means, of course, and it's rather common sense, I think, that that's not the only amendment to the Constitution that has been manipulated. It's not the only one, of course, that individuals have bent in order to favor their political leaning, or again, their entire melting pot fiasco and wanting all of that to transpire, not to mention, of course, the depopulation of real natural-born citizens, certainly those of European descent, and a number of other reasons. But this is something, again, that really does have to go through. The executive order has to go through, and frankly, it needs to just be properly interpreted law. Now, if the executive order goes through, then that would, of course, mean, I think anyway, that it would have to be interpreted correctly in the future going forward. You can't have an executive order that clearly states its intent, have the Supreme Court take it up, and then if the Supreme Court denies it, well, then that just opens the floodgates for more people to come to our country illegally, reproduce here, say, whoopsie, we had a child. Well, our child's a natural-born citizen, which means you can't deport us. Which means, again, if the parents of a anchor baby get deported because one or both are illegal, where does the baby go? Then it becomes a product of the government. And as we know what happens with babies who are products of the government, you're talking about organ harvesting, you're talking about child trafficking, and a number of other things. The Supreme Court's going to take this up in the early spring of 2026, and early summer is when they expect a ruling to come down on this. You can already see the outrage, can't you? You can already see the riots. You can already see endless people screaming at the top of their lungs. But hey, again, if there's a process in place, and it basically says, from this moment forward, no more anchor babies, it doesn't mean that those who are already anchor babies right now, again, aren't citizens. I mean, legally they shouldn't be, but even so, if they are now, or they're interpreted as being citizens now, and that, again, stays in place, then I guess that's fine. It's fine for some people, but whatever. Just as long as it doesn't happen anymore. I think that's kind of the direction that this is going in. And again, the simple fact that they're taking it up, I think, is fantastic. And again, if it's one of those plays where it's sort of a little reverse psychology, where they're openly saying, hey, look, I wrote an executive order, now try to reverse it. Now, what do you think about that? And then throws it into the court system to again see what these individuals actually do with it. If that, again, makes an amendment even stronger than it was already originally written, then good. I think that's a good thing. Again, it begs the question, is this kayfabe? Is this the purposeful, again, declass of certain information that we are all seeing with our own eyes? Does this also mean, again, that the court is occupied by good individuals to some extent in order to rule positively on this particular issue? I think time will tell on a lot of that. Again, if you take into account the simple fact that we are still a country at war and that we are being invaded and have been invaded, you would think, again, that a Supreme Court that is being run by the military, or again, with military being in charge, as we are told and as has been interpreted, that those individuals would view the business of birthright citizenship and illegal aliens coming here, reproducing, and leaving their children here as quote-unquote citizens, that would be looked at as a national security threat. If it's a national security threat and the military is in charge, then, well, there would have to be a positive ruling that comes down that says no more birthright citizenship, no more anchor babies. Because again, it would have to be a national security threat. And if anybody was curious, it turns out that there's approximately 34 countries that offer unconditional birthright citizenship. That's not many, based on all of the countries in the world, and as it turns out, the vast majority of those countries, those 34, happen to be in South America. So, for one reason or another, that seems to be the case down there, but that doesn't mean that it has to be the case up here. Okay, on to education news here. This was a story that was tossed my way by a family member, and this is out of St. Louis, Missouri. This has to do with what I would call, frankly, a rather common practice, which unfortunately is paying out superintendents as soon as they show up for a job, and then something sketchy shows up, either in their background check or something from their past or something from their history. And then they basically say, yes, we know we hired you and we promised you a contract and all of this, but now you have to leave. And here's $230,000 in order to just leave. And that's exactly what happened in this particular case. Again, the specifics of the case are not known to the public, at least the general public, certainly not right now anyway. But I believe that there are individuals involved, lawyers specifically, trying to unseal exactly what's been going on here within this school district, because the school district's wanting to keep this one quiet. And that right there should prove that they are criminal organizations, because if they make a hire and then get rid of the person and give them a massive payout and then they leave and then they don't tell anybody why, well, that's what criminal organizations do. This is from FirstAlert4.com. Francis Howell is the school district to hand over records on $230,000 superintendent exit after subpoena. It says the school district confirms that it will give the state auditor's office records related to Mike Dominguez's pricey departure. Now, this, of course, is after they originally declined to hand over any information having to do with the departure of their superintendent. But give this audio a listen in 3, 2, 1.
Investigates continues probing the secrecy surrounding a superintendent's sudden departure. So much so, the Missouri State Auditor has now subpoenaed the Francis Howell School District to get them to explain why they let Superintendent Mike Dominguez here walk away before starting and still collect a $250,000 payout. More than 4 months after the Francis Howell School Board approved a nearly $230,000 separation agreement with former Superintendent Mike Dominguez, the state auditor's office says they still don't have answers about why Dominguez was paid to leave as he was securing a new 6-figure job in Shawnee, Oklahoma. The state has been investigating Dominguez's departure since August, now saying the district obstructed the investigation. After little cooperation, the auditor subpoenaed the district last week, demanding an explanation of the reasons that led to the resignation of Dominguez. The district now says it will turn over all requested documents after its lawyer previously cited confidentiality. The Holy Joe Society, a good government watchdog group, first asked the auditor back in August to investigate how the district is spending your money. We're still without answers. How should taxpayers be feeling about this?
Well, as a taxpayer myself, I'd be a little annoyed and upset. Clearly, the hide the ball approach is wrong.
Durker says this approach only adds more legal bills for the district and taxpayers.
That's why we exist, is to try to use persuasion, if possible, and litigation is our last resort.
The state auditor is already doing a follow-up audit after rating Francis Howell poor last year for lack of transparency on other pricey projects. The records that the Francis Howell School District says it will hand over by the end of this week include an explanation of the reasons that led to Dominguez's departure, as well as application materials and reference checks. First Alert 4 has previously covered Dominguez's somewhat troubled past, but the district will not confirm why they let him walk. This all comes as the district promoted interim superintendent Mark Delaney permanently to the role just this week. He has a contract that will keep him in that role through June of 2028.
That's the end of the clip, but there's also this story. And again, I think that this just simply reeks of passing the trash. This has to do with the school district not engaging in their due diligence, not doing background checks, not even engaging in open records requests to gain previous information on a superintendent. This is again also from First Alert 4. It says former Francis Howell superintendent's past linked to another six-figure payout in Kansas. Again, St. Charles County. First Alert 4 Investigates has uncovered new records showing that former Francis Howell Superintendent Mike Dominguez's leadership in Kansas coincided with another costly payout, this one totaling $233,000 to a longtime employee and his deputy. After a public information request into settlements involving Dominguez, the Garden City Public School District confirmed it paid Deputy Superintendent Glenda LaBarbera, if I'm saying that right, $233,000 in a settlement to avoid administrative complaints, quote unquote, and other claims, quote unquote, she had while working under Dominguez during his 3-year tenure there. Let that sink in for just a second. They paid a district in Kansas, completely separate from Missouri. They paid a woman who was an employee working under that superintendent Dominguez. They paid her $233,000 to keep her mouth shut. This reeks, does it not? It says a spokesperson for Garden City Public Schools told First Alert that LaBarbera was a district employee for 12 years. Former Garden City School Board candidate Whitney Buckman first told First Alert that Dominguez's time in Garden City was marked by heavy staff turnover. Quote, we had a lot of turnover under Dominguez, and he did not respect the staff, Buckman said. We were just going through staff like crazy, unquote. The settlement amount is strikingly close to the $229,000 payout Francis Howell gave Dominguez earlier this month when he resigned before ever working a day in the district. His contract allowed the board to enforce a clause requiring him to stay, but the legal experts say the district likely entered into what it called a mutual agreement to part ways, citing Dominguez's family needs. Ah, yes, the old family excuse. I have to leave and spend more time with my family because another opportunity has come up and that's just the way that it needs to be. Sure. Believe it or not, this Dominguez guy is an assistant superintendent in Shawnee, Oklahoma. So he's getting hired. Even after all of this, all of these news stories, you would think again that would be some kind of a, red flag to never hire this person ever again. But this, again, dips its toes right into a particular subject that I've brought up on the show before, which is the following. This is what is wrong with not just the entire education system, but it's the organizations, and more specifically, the superintendent associations that exist within states and nationally. When you are a superintendent of a district, you are put into a pool of other superintendents. And when you are leaving one district, the superintendent association will come to your aid. You again would be a paying member of said association, and then they would do everything that they do to find you employment. They are basically your superintendent agents, so to speak. School teachers really don't have agents working on their behalf, but superintendents do. I'll take it a step further. Superintendent associations also do this. They pay districts to keep their mouths shut. They will pay them to basically say, if the media comes knocking, do not give them what they want. Do whatever you have to do to turn a blind eye. If they request information through open records requests, tell them that their requests are far too broad. Don't get specific with them under any circumstance. But then again, if it's brought out in court or a subpoena is issued, then of course you have to follow the law. But there might be ways around that. But either way, here's a little under the table check from the Superintendent Association just to make sure that we can move our superintendent around to other districts, and that you, of course, being a former employee or employer rather of theirs, doesn't say too much and doesn't speak out about this publicly. That happens all of the time too. Because why? Because it's organized crime. That's the way that they operate. This is the behavior of the people who engage in these kinds of things. The Westerville City Schools in Westerville, Ohio was a perfect example of this. They brought in a guy when their outgoing superintendent decided to resign and became some administrator or something at Columbus State University, if I'm not mistaken. And then they brought in this other guy from God knows where, could have been around the Cleveland area if memory serves. And he didn't sit on that. He didn't sit in that position as the superintendent of Westerville City Schools for no longer than a month. But when he showed up, he was given a giant award by the Superintendents Association. A representative of the Superintendents Association showed up in a board meeting, open to the public, gave him this giant award. You guys have no idea what a great superintendent you're getting, and he's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and he's the cat's pajamas, and blah, blah, blah. And all those women on that board were just applauding, and yay, we've got a new superintendent, and he's a good guy because these strangers we've never met say so. And then before you know it, he was gone. And what they chalk up his resignation to? They said, well, we cut him loose because he broke board policy, because he was giving a presentation to the community, and he was hawking one of his books in one of his slides of one of his presentations, one of the books that he had written. And you can't use, whatever they said, you can't use the district's name to hawk your wares. It seems like it should have been a slap on the wrist, but they cut him loose quick. So, interesting. But there's more to that story, I'm almost certain. Again, there has to be, just like there is with this one. This story, though, however, wraps up, keeping in mind again that the trash has been passed and this guy is now employed in Oklahoma. It says contracts requested and obtained by First Alert 4 show that the Francis House School Board also spent nearly $30,000 on a contract with School Exec Connect, the search firm that found and vetted Dominguez. That agreement included allowances for travel and other expenses that could have added about $20,000 more to the total. So they spent approximately $50,000 to look into this guy's past by spending $50,000 on a search firm, essentially, or a vetting firm. It says the district and school board have not explained why taxpayer dollars were used to pay and release a superintendent who never started the job. The Missouri State Auditor's Office says it will look into the payout as part of a follow-up investigation after the district received a poor rating in December for issues with transparency and financial mismanagement. Oh, I'm sure that's the least of their problems. Local government watchdog group urged the auditor as well as the Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey to look into the payout. Oklahoma State Superintendent Ryan Walters says he's looking into Dominguez's hiring at Shawnee Public Schools as well, unquote. Yeah. Probably time to get rid of his administrative license. It's organized crime, ladies and gentlemen. No way around it. Organized crime. When you're shaking hands in the shadows and you're giving each other payments under the table and you're turning blind eyes and you're not letting individuals again speak out or even report on their feelings of a former coworker or employee or whatever. And then you have a hiring firm such as a superintendent's association, basically, again, shopping around the trash for other people to hire. That's organized crime. It's disorganized because, again, a watchful eye can catch these people. But if you're not paying attention, or you don't even know that these organizations exist and have each other's backs no matter what, well, people are going to get hurt. Good people are going to get hurt. Now, speaking of good people getting hurt, but getting even, this brings us to the Thomas More Society article. It says the Thomas More Society secures historic $10 million settlement against the University of Colorado Medical School for religious discrimination. Victory. It says Thomas More Society is pleased to announce that after more than a year of settlement negotiations following a landmark decision by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit in 2024, the University of Colorado Anschutz School of Medicine has agreed to pay more than $10.3 million in damages, tuition, and attorney's fees to 18 plaintiffs who were denied religious accommodations to mandatory COVID-19 vaccination. The settlement ends nearly a half-decade of litigation in federal and state court and represents a historic victory for religious freedom nationwide. Class action lawsuits, ladies and gentlemen, they work. The result is one of the only in the country in which plaintiffs recovered money damages under the First Amendment for a challenge to a government COVID-19 vaccine mandate. This should be happening at every university, regardless of their school, but within every university across the nation. Every single one of them. It says government officials, including defendant Chancellor Donald Elliman, are generally protected by qualified immunity, quote unquote. However, after the 10th Circuit ruled, the actions of Chancellor Elliman and other defendants violated the plaintiffs' clearly established First Amendment rights. The university agreed to pay damages under the First Amendment to all plaintiffs. The plaintiffs who sued anonymously included former and current employees and students, including physicians, medical students, nurses, medical professionals, and administrative and operations staff. Going forward, the university has agreed to allow students to request religious accommodations on equal terms as employees and to give the same consideration to requests for religious exemptions as are given for medical exemptions, contrary to the university's actions in this case. In addition, it is agreed to refrain from future inquisitions into the supposed legitimacy of students' and employees' religious beliefs after initially denying all requests for religious exemption from COVID-19 vaccination on that pretense. Yes, this is massive, and this is so important. I've said it before. I'll say it again. The simple fact that the universities in any working environment had at their disposal the option for a religious exemption and or a medical exemption, and you filled it out and sent it in by simply having those exemptions available would mean that if an individual doesn't want to take it, you fill out the exemption and every exemption should be, again, accepted. But that's not what happened. In fact, in many cases, whether they want to admit it or not, these universities and endless places of employment, including government positions, three-letter agencies, etc., they had quotas where basically, again, if a certain number of people filled out the exemptions, then they would cap it at that number. So anybody else filling out an exemption after that capped number, well, they were screwed. Take the shots or lose your job. But again, why have the exemption then if you're not going to accept it? Why even offer it in the first place? Or better yet, the simple fact that they would have an exemption or that anybody would have an exemption for these bioweapon shots, that alone should show that if individuals don't want to take it, then just let them not take it. But if people want to take it because they think that they are more knowledgeable about what they're doing to themselves, well, then give them the option to take it too. But again, everybody's rights were stripped from them because theoretically there was no option. It was do what the place of employment, in this case university or school of medicine, says or else. I'm telling you, the blood on these people's hands is an incalculable number. It's too much. It goes on here. It says, quote, no amount of compensation or course correction can make up for the life-altering damage Chancellor Elliman and Anschutz, School of Medicine, inflicted on the plaintiffs and so many others throughout this case who felt forced to succumb to a manifestly irrational mandate. Said Michael McHale, senior counsel at Thomas More Society, quote, at great and sometimes career-ending costs, our heroic clients fought for the First Amendment freedoms of all Americans who were put to the unconscionable choice of their livelihoods or their faith during what Justice Gorsuch has rightly declared one of the greatest intrusions on civil liberties in the peacetime history of this country, unquote. We are confident our clients' long overdue victory indeed confirms, despite the tyrannical efforts of many, that our shared constitutional right to religious liberty endures. It says the 10th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals held that the university's widespread denial of religious exemptions to COVID-19 vaccination was motivated by religious animus. The university had initially denied all religious exemptions via a terse email from a anonymous vaccine verify, quote-unquote, committee, concluding that requesters failed to present a religious belief whose teachings are opposed to all immunizations. Jeez, these people are crazy. But again, don't think this is the only place where this happened. This happened everywhere because these people talk. All of these, again, administrators and administrations and colleges and schools of study, and they all talk with one another, regardless of the state. They're all sharing notes and emails. Here's how we get around this. Here's how we screw these people. They do it all the time. It says, although the university attempted to amend its policy in the face of judicial review, the 10th Circuit held the university's transparent litigation posturing and continuing First Amendment violations in the amended policy failed to moot plaintiffs' claims. The men and women at the heart of this case are true heroes, said Peter Breen, Executive Vice President and Head of Litigation at Thomas More Society. They stood up at great personal cost to an injustice that never should have been inflicted on them or on any American. These are kind, compassionate medical professionals who entered their field to serve and care for others, yet they were treated with shocking disregard for their rights and scoffed at for their deeply held beliefs. Because they had the courage to say no when their religious freedoms were trampled, people of faith across the country are now enjoying stronger protections. They deserve every bit of justice they've received in this case and more. It says the university apparently paid out $1 million in attorney's fees, so you take $10.3 million, divide it by 18 people, and that's basically what each person got, apparently. Yeah, this is messed up, but good for them. They won. They all teamed up. They had a massive society here of lawyers go after these individuals for violating their rights, which is crystal clear that that's exactly what was going on in this entire process. All because of what? Because these individuals believe in something that doesn't even exist. And then they enforce it from complete strangers who also either know that it doesn't exist and they don't care and they just love, again, engaging in a social experiment to kill as many Americans as humanly possible, or they themselves didn't know that COVID doesn't exist either. But who's to say? Again, I'm happy for the plaintiffs in this case. It's a very good thing, very good victory. Now do it everywhere else. Nab all of these people. Again, you know the evidence that they had against those people was thick, too. They had emails back and forth, them openly criticizing the individuals, filling out the exemptions, openly saying again that these people aren't religious and we need to cancel their exemptions no matter what they say, no matter what documentation they provide. It is biblical. There is no doubt about it. You have individuals, again, who believe in Christ and know that all of that was 100% demonic and coercive in all of the wrong ways, because there's no good ways to any of that, of course, no good angle to look at. And then you had individuals, again, who just fell for it. They didn't question a single thing with it. They didn't say, wow, this seems strange. Why is everybody acting this way? Why is everybody saying the same thing? Why is everybody falling in line? No one's stepping out of line and saying, hold on, slow down. It's possible we're being lied to. It's just incredible. Now, let me mention this, again, sliding into jab-related things here as well. Of course, that was a massive victory, but as we know, the enemy is always moving, and the enemy is always manipulating people, or certainly attempting to. If you watch, good Lord, 1 hour of television, certainly during a sporting event, all of the different commercials that they have on are certainly catered to an entire family. And every single kind of, I would say, demographic of individual that exists, certainly in America. Again, the mixed race couples are in every flipping commercial. It's disgusting and overwhelming. The minority couples that exist within these commercials is over flippin' whelming. You are hard-pressed to find a white European descent couple within any commercial, unless, of course, it's either a jewelry commercial or a, I don't know, some kind of a cologne or perfume, fragrance commercial, something along those lines. But every other kind of commercial, I'm telling you, you're not going to find it. I did see this one commercial, which was, it was laughable. It was absolutely laughable. It was a commercial having to do with this Nutrafol, which apparently is some kind of a hair regrowth supplement or pill that somebody takes or a powder that they drink or whatever. So let me get this portion out of the way before I mention what the actual commercial was. First of all, if you're a female and you want to take a hair regrowth, hair thickening supplement of some kind, I'm all for it. Go for it. No criticism. You'll never get any criticism from me. However, if you're a man or claim to be, and you're taking hair restoration anything, I'm a little more critical. Because again, you're talking to a guy and listening to a guy who's been shaving his head since he was 26. And I didn't hesitate. Again, my story was very typical with many people. I had a short haircut to begin with. I was usually a skin fade kind of guy. Would, comb or mess up my hair on top, and then it was basically a tapered skin fade down to the sides of my face. That's usually how I rocked it. It was kind of a crew cut look, but it was a little longer on top, so I could comb it anyway. But when I started to lose it, I immediately noticed it. And I also knew that I liked a short haircut. So then I said, well, to hell with it. I'm just going to buzz my hair, and then eventually I'll just start shaving it. And that's exactly what I did. And I've been doing that ever since I was 26. But in this Nutrafol commercial, this hair restoration commercial that was playing during, I think it was the SEC championship or the MAC championship, whatever it was a male with long hair that's kind of slicked back, and he's on some house or apartment patio, and he's taking this product, and he or his voice or someone's voice, as he's running his fingers through his hair, he says something to the tune of, now that my hair is thicker and has more grip and bounce, I find it improving my social life. And I stopped and I thought to myself, wait a minute. That's what a woman would say. That's not what a man says. No man goes, no straight man anyway. No straight man openly says, since my hair has more volume and bounce, I find my social life to be far more enjoyable and easy to maintain, or something along those lines. Again, it's feminizing men. It's designed to feminize men. It's designed to make them the same, create this gender-neutral, what one does, the other can do. What one has concerns with, the other can have concerns with. Again, think of your ancestors. Did your ancestors ever say such a thing, let alone the male ones? Where would my social life be if I didn't have this thick head of hair that I could run my fingers through and improve my social life, and thank God for this natural bounce because of this drug that I now take, which has side effects? Did your ancestors say that? If the answer is no, then don't do it. Then don't do it. Again, then you're not a man. You're just pretending. You sound like a woman. And that's an insult to females. Because again, if women want to thicken up their hair and do that artificially because they're losing it for one reason or another, like I said at the top, go for it. But if you're a man and you're losing your hair, get the clippers out and shave your flippin' head. Shave it. Because again, the longer it looks when you're losing it, the worse it will look. A clean-shaven head looks good. Most people seem to enjoy it. It's not a bad thing. Again, I remember working around men who, again, had thinning hair. They were older than me. Way older than me. I mean, I was theoretically young enough to be their son. And they're walking around and they're doing whatever they can do to make it look like they have more hair than they have. And we're having a face-to-face conversation. And I'm thinking, as I'm looking at them, I'm thinking to myself, look at me. Just look at the way that my shaved head looks. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's cheap. There are no problems. The only side effect is I don't have any hair to basically create any kind of a pad or a cushion. So when I hit something, I either knock myself out cold or I bleed. I mean, that's the downside. But beyond that, there's no downside. I just can't believe, again, that dudes don't do it. They go to great lengths to try to make it look like they have more hair than they have, and the fact is you're not tricking anybody. But this feminizing of men on these commercials is exhausting. It's exhausting. And the next time, again, if anybody ever chooses to watch even an hour of these commercials, pay attention to how stupid all of the white men are also. They're all portrayed as morons. They're either morons or they're pretending to be women. The men are all dumb. The black men have it all figured out. The white men don't. The women are the ones who are fixing every problem. The men are the ones screwing everything up. I mean, it really is directed at hating specifically on white men all of the time. It's why I don't watch TV. Again, I'm just trying to watch a meaningless football game that, just to basically, again, catch the fraud as much as humanly possible, which, by the way, there was plenty of it. And there were certain calls, of course, going in certain directions that were obvious. And then the announcers, again, would just be like, anyway, ho-hum, on to the next play. It's overwhelming. But speaking of all of that, there was also this. I got a text message from Cicely Hellickson, and this was hilarious. And I'm going to read you this text thread because it was funny. And then I looked it up, and sure enough, yeah, she was 100% right. I was getting the mail the other day, and my phone rings in my back pocket, and she says, "Check out Kirk Herbstreit's right eye. Something's not right. He's jacked up." And I thought, uh-oh, what happened to Kirk Herbstreit? Now again, just to review, Kirk Herbstreit took the COVID shots. 1 year after taking them, he ended up with not a pulmonary embolism to this point, but he had a blood clot. One of these fibrous nanoparticle clots, apparently in his lung. And I assume it was either taken out or removed or something, but again, he's openly admitted that he's on blood thinners, and now we know he's at the very least clotted at one point. One of his sons, of course, Zach, has permanent heart damage as a result of taking the shots when he was on the roster of the Ohio State Buckeyes. No longer plays for Ohio State, but there you go. All of that happened. Fast forward to now, Cicely sends me that, and I texted her back, and I said, stroke-like? And she said, doesn't look right at all. And I said, what channel's he on? And they said, she said, game day on ESPN, I believe, but the noon games have started, so it may already be over. We just caught the tail end when they were making their picks, but he'll probably be calling the SEC game later this evening. I said, if he calls the SEC game later, I'll check it out. Figured I'd watch these ones today. She said, yeah, it's definitely stroke-like. And then I said, okay, just saw it, because I looked it up, got on YouTube, looked up game day, went full screen on my computer when it was just him looking into the camera talking by himself, and then I took a screenshot of his face, and then I zoomed in, and I went, oh yeah. So my first acknowledgement is that his right eyebrow was going upward while his left eyebrow was not. So I thought, are we talking face paralysis? Like, what's going on here? And then I zoomed in closer and I went, there it is. Kirk Herbstreit has a broken blood vessel in his right eyeball. Now, some would say that's not uncommon, and some would say again that that's, of course, from strain, or it's from weightlifting, or it's from what have you. And then I looked it up, and here's what it said on Brave AI. It said a broken blood vessel in the eye, known as a subconjunctival hemorrhage, I'm saying that right, is commonly caused by sudden increases in pressure within the blood vessels of the eye, such as from coughing, sneezing, vomiting, or straining during physical activity. Other frequent causes include vigorous eye rubbing, trauma to the eye or head, and the use of contact lenses, particularly if they are dirty, old, or improperly removed. Underlying health conditions like high blood pressure, diabetes, or blood clotting disorders, as well as medications such as aspirin or blood thinners, can also increase the risk. And then it says, in some cases, the cause may be unknown, and the condition can occur spontaneously, unquote. Well, I think we're somewhere in the underlying health conditions like blood pressure, blood clotting disorders, and medication ballpark, if I had to take a guess. Again, just a very good observation on her part, and yeah, Herbstreit's jabbed. So, who's to say what's going to happen, but yeah. It's not, I mean, I don't know. I've never had a broken blood vessel in my eye before. It's never happened. Now watch, it'll happen. And then I'll look it up and panic. Oh my God, I could have an underlying health condition of some kind. But yeah, it would be interesting to find out how common it is among individuals, again, who have taken the shots. That would be an interesting one. Let's see. Speaking of that, the died suddenlies are stacking up. There apparently was a 31-year-old NASCAR driver who has also passed away suddenly, quote unquote. No one knows the cause of death, or at least no one's saying. So yeah, not linking it to jabs. I have no idea, just throwing it out there. Let me get into this now. This is the hepatitis B vaccine debate that's going back and forth. And there's been a lot of debate about this, and I find it interesting, but it's also in moments like this where the corrupt will come out of the weeds and expose themselves. And I can't help but think of Senator Bill Cassidy, I believe his name is. He chaired the committee that ran RFK through the grinder there in his selection hearings. There we go. Sorry, brain fart. I'm having a stroke, that's why. But either way, Bill Cassidy doesn't like RFK, and that's pretty crystal clear. Bill Cassidy, of course, is a practicing physician and has been for a great deal of time. He believes the virology lie. He, too, has been dishing out shots left and right to God knows how many people for God knows how long. So the last thing he wants to hear is when anybody shows up and says that vaccines kill people or that they are unnecessary because, of course, he, as a physician, has been making money on the back of the entire corrupt vaccination industry. So let me read this particular X post. This is from a Kelly DNP, Functional Integrative Medicine, at KACDNP91 on X. And their bio here says trauma, CV, ICU, early treatment, functional medicine, cardiology, clinical research, whistleblower, medical murder, FLCCC.net. Okay, U.S. Army wife. She says the following here, quote, the new ACIP wording, what it really means and what it doesn't. Quote, a lot of people are celebrating ACIP's recent decision to soften the hepatitis B birth dose recommendation for infants born to HB's AG negative mothers. It says the new language says parents should make an individual decision with their provider about if or when their baby receives the HBV shot, and what if they skip the birth dose. The first dose should not be given before 2 months of age. Many are calling this a huge win, quote unquote, but let's be honest, it's not. Yes, the wording changed. No, the system didn't. Hospitals and pediatric networks run on protocols, rigid, pre-approved, liability-driven protocols that don't suddenly shift because a committee tweaked a sentence. It says, so, while ACIP opened a tiny door on paper, here is the reality inside the actual labor and delivery rooms in pediatric offices. Hospitals will keep pushing the birth dose. Hospital policies are written at the administrative level, not by ACIP. Nurses are trained to automatically administer the birth dose unless a parent declines before delivery. Refusals are treated as paperwork problems, not informed decisions. Hospitals benefit from maintaining high vaccination numbers. So even with the new wording, most parents won't see anything different. The script won't change. The pressures won't stop. The routine, quote unquote, box will already be checked before your baby even arrives. Pediatricians will still recommend it as strongly as ever. Pediatric practices are built on quality measures, metrics tied to insurance scoring and reimbursement. Hepatitis B uptake is one of those metrics. That means even if ACIP loosens its language, pediatricians will continue to, 4 bullet points, frame the shot as standard, quote unquote, ask as though delaying is dangerous, push the 3-dose schedule, and pressure hesitant parents as usual. The culture doesn't change because the printout does. The incentives don't change either. Parents already had this right long before ACIP admitted it. This is the part no one is saying aloud. Parents have always had the right to decline or delay the hepatitis B shot for their newborn, always. The only difference now is that ACIP finally put a small acknowledgement of that reality into words, and only for babies whose mothers test negative. That's not a revolution. That's not a system shift. It's a breadcrumb, and it will not magically transform how hospitals or pediatricians behave. So what does this decision mean? It means that we still have a medical system built on pressure first, consent second. It means nothing meaningful changes without educated parents who know their rights before stepping into the room. It means we cannot rely on committees to free parents. Parents must free themselves. This is why sharing the truth matters more than ever. Those of us who understand what's actually inside these products, how they're made, and what they do to the body, know how important genuine informed choice is, especially when systems are designed to bury that truth. We are already heavily suppressed online. We are throttled, shadow banned, and buried in the algorithm. So when you share, comment, like, or tag, you're not just clicking buttons, you're helping push truth back into the light. The committee didn't create this win, quote unquote. We do. Every time we speak up, educate, and support parents in standing their ground, unquote. That's well said, I think. I agree with her 100%. The enemy's not going to quit. They're brainwashed. They're not going to turn on their own company. They're threatened by their own company. They have mortgage payments. They have whatever they have. And again, it's their employment. They're not going to turn on it. They're not going to open up their mind, which again is part of the problem and more proof that the matrix exists. And an individual, again, who is more knowledgeable can exist outside of that particular line of work and actually walk in and look at the people who work within those hospitals and those doctors' offices and say, hey, by the way, you're doing this wrong. I mean, if you say that to any of them, they, of course, engage in full-blown sophistry. They'll look at you and they'll say, well, what do you know? Are you a nurse? Are you a doctor? Because they believe that you have to be in order to be knowledgeable about something, but you don't. Again, I think it was last week I said in an episode that this COVID discussion has re-amplified itself here in recent months. It's not going away. It's re-energized. And more individuals, again, are consistently bringing this up. Of course, people are consistently witnessing illness left and right, certainly among those who took the shots. But even so, the information that's rolling out and the truth that's been rolling out as a result of it, like the Thomas More lawsuit that I mentioned earlier, these things are undeniable. Again, is Fox News or CNN going to bring up that particular story? Probably not. But they will interview a Senator Bill Cassidy, so-called conservative, so-called Republican, and get his take because, well, he's a doctor and he knows. RFK's not a doctor, so he doesn't know anything. At the end of the day, again, people have to remove themselves from government. They have to become knowledgeable about these subjects on their own. That, again, is exactly why if an individual is hooked into the brainwashing meat grinder of a television all of the time and they're paying attention to that, you're not getting anything healthy. It's all bad. Microwaved meals, goy slop, hair regrowth treatment, mixed race couples, fraud in sport. There isn't a single thing on the television that's actually good for you. Not one. You don't see them promoting exercise necessarily unless it's something that's super expensive like a Peloton. But everybody who owns one of those, if they even buy them, ends up selling them. Which means why'd you get it in the first place? It's amazing to me. There was also this regarding, again, Brooke Jackson's case. And she, of course, was a Pfizer whistleblower and sought to sue Pfizer for, again, engaging in misleading claims, of course, and unregulated practices. And she's right. I mean, that goes without saying. But this is from the Gateway Pundit this past week. It said DOJ moves to shut down Pfizer clinical trial whistleblower case even as FDA confirms children died from COVID vaccines. Again, it was filed in 2021. And her case lays out very specifically through the False Claims Act complaint the following, that Pfizer fabricated and falsified patient data. Ineligible trial subjects were injected anyway. They engaged in a unblinded staff with vaccine packaging and randomized materials left open view and error that legally requires the site to halt injections immediately. There were temperature control failures. There were unqualified personnel administering the injections, failure to monitor patients for adverse events, sloppy or fraudulent quality checks, quote unquote, and serious safety events not being reported to Pfizer within 24 hours. It says the lawsuit accuses Pfizer and its contractors of submitting false claims, falsifying or concealing clinical trial data, retaliating against a whistleblower, violating FDA regulations, federal law, and good clinical practice, and endangering patient safety. It says on the morning of September 25th, 2020, she called the FDA hotline, told them what was up, and then she was fired that same day, apparently. Again, it was the Biden DOJ, apparently, that openly said that they would not dismiss the case, but then they later dismissed her case. So it's basically saying, hey, look, children have died from these shots, even though they've just decided to somehow use the number 10 for some reason. 10 of them have died. No, it's not 10. We're talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions worldwide. Again, it's a number that is incalculable, but if anybody actually believes it's only 10, they're fooling themselves. Just another example, again, of government overreach. They're never going to admit that they're wrong. They're not going to do it. They're going to double down on their stance. They're going to use the weight and the monetary whatever backstop that they have, which they have it, and that massive club that they swing around, and they're going to use that to go after anybody and everybody who questions them. That's their playbook. It's the way they operate all of the time. It's disgusting. And then they throw things like this in your face also. I'm going to wrap up with this one, even though I'd like to spend a ton of time on this, but I will put together a little Substack about this because this is hilarious. This was a commercial that I saw also, unfortunately, during some of those football games, and it had to do with what is called Inspire. This is Inspire therapy. This is the wireless body area network in a nutshell. This is exactly what endless people have been warning about for years. It's what I've been, again, writing about and talking about for a very long time. This is not only a wearable, but this is an implantable as well. It's both. And this has to do with sleep apnea. So basically, in a nutshell, if a person has sleep apnea, you take this wired device that can also be, again, read wirelessly, but it is wired, and it sits and is literally implanted under your skin below your collarbone on the right-hand side of your chest. And it says the Inspire implant. The Inspire implant keeps your airway open while you sleep so you can breathe regularly and sleep soundly. Oh, I'm sure people will be sleeping soundly when this is implanted into their body and all of a sudden stops working properly. It says the Inspire remote then simply turns on your therapy when you're ready to sleep. No mask or hose required. So it's this lighted up device that uses internet and, of course, wireless wavelengths to then be downloaded onto a phone app to then tell you how it's working and how long you're sleeping and all this other sleep summary gobbledygook. It says the Inspire app tracks your sleep goals and allows you to share data directly with your doctor. This is such a problem, but it's happening, ladies and gentlemen. It's been around for a while. Not necessarily this device, but devices like it. These wearables are all bad for people. This is the wireless body area network. I know someone is going to say, whatever, Sean, I use it and I love it and it saved my life. Good for you. What about the long-term ramifications of using such a thing? If you can get a tumor from using a cell phone, what do you think is going to happen when you have a wired and wireless device on your chest? That means, again, that your phone, at the very least, has to be around you. The internet has to be turned on. And certainly this battery-powered, what have you, device that's implanted in your skin is on all of the time as well. Oh, it's fine. There's just some minor side effects. Don't worry. Here's what it actually says about how this all works more specifically. Let me scroll down here. Again, their website is exactly what you would expect. It's evil propaganda. It says the small Inspire implant is placed near your collarbone during an approximately 60-minute outpatient procedure. After the procedure, most people require nothing more than an over-the-counter pain medication and within a few days can resume non-strenuous activities. And then that's basically it. Then you use the device, the handheld device, to basically turn on the device that's inside of your body, and then, of course, that's being read by the internet on your cell phone. I'm sorry. This is just, it's remarkably unhealthy. It's completely terrible. This is the Internet of Bodies. This is the Internet of Things. That's what all of this is. Again, the research papers that have been written about this and how ubiquitous this is going to be for individuals, again, who are quote-unquote unhealthy or have a condition. They're doing what they have to do to make it so that these devices are mandatory. They're never going to tell you about losing weight or exercising. They're never going to tell you about any of that. They're never going to tell you about diet changes or sleep positions or anything else that they could actually work with you on. Nope. It's immediate doctor's visit, immediate implant underneath your skin, immediate wireless device, and then you're hooked up. And as you would expect, they don't tell you what it costs, because why would they? They don't want you to know what it costs. They want you to find a doctor, take their online test to see if you qualify for such a thing. Have you ever had a sleeping problem before? You probably have sleep apnea. 90% of people who use a CPAP machine are glad that they don't use it, but they're glad that they use this. Again, long-term ramifications, anybody care about any of that? Short-term ramifications, anybody care anything about that either? It's amazing. Again, they don't promote health on television. They're not going to do it. It isn't advantageous for them. A lost human being in the medical industry is again a lost patient. It's lost money. And they don't want that. They just want you to keep buying more and think you have a problem. It's exhausting, but again, it is the enemy, and they're not going to quit. So don't buy into it. Look past it, recognize it for the fraud that it is. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. I will catch you on Wednesday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.